afternoon, everybody. It's now 4 o'clock. I'll call this meeting to order. If you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Patrick Marlena.
Pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a quick roll call. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Patrick Cannon.
Present.
Mara here. So today we'll review the policies that we were talking about at the last meeting. We'll start with KCG for public gifts and public gifts to the schools.
So the only change to this from our last meeting was the removal of that sentence that referred to businesses, industries, or other special interest groups in the first paragraph.
Okay. Did anybody have any other suggested changes? So, of the policies that were in the book for today, I just want to make sure we bring the right one forward.
It's the one that should say
Draft.
with changes discussed on 213.
On the top there, one changes on the top.
Yep, okay.
And draft.
So, all those in favor for bringing it to allowing us to go to the full committee for a vote, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody say nay? Nope. Okay. This will go to the committee. So the next one we'll review will be IKF graduation requirements.
And just to give the history of where we were at the last meeting, we were in the process of adjusting the graduation requirements in order to conform to the new opportunities that are available at the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative for 9th graders with the academic competencies embedded. That was the last paragraph of that proposed policy change. In the context of that, some questions came up about the rest of the graduation requirements for our high school. So we basically just said, well, let's pull this back. We need to have some high school staff here to discuss it. So that's as far as we got with that one.
So I was going through some other policies from other schools, and I thought it was interesting and wanted to bring forward, just for consideration by the subcommittee and you, the superintendent, that Whittier Regional School has their graduation requirement, which basically is a very high overview. But what it does is it ensures that the superintendent of the district will make sure that the student handbook contains all approved graduation requirements, guidelines for competency determination, including guidelines for appeal and guidelines for certificate of attainment. But it also identifies that students who achieve the approved graduation requirements of the committee and state curriculum mandates, but who are unable to achieve a state competency determination, may be eligible to receive a certificate of attainment. So my thought in bringing this policy example forward was that we as a school committee are responsible for creating a policy. It's the district administrators who create the procedure for that. And I'm wondering if we should consider having the graduation requirement be that the district establishes that and it's maintained in the handbook, because the handbook is reviewed every year and approved by the school committee. But should it need to change, our policy wouldn't change, the handbook requirements would change.
How about this? I would say the program of studies might be, for us, the more appropriate document, if you want to embed it within a different document.
Well, I think even the program of studies is sort of outlined in the student and employee handbooks. So there's always that drive back to, and it's just a thought, I'm not saying that we need to change any of what we've already been discussing about the requirements. It's just, if something changes in the curriculum next year, it's making sure that going forward, we as a school committee do a really good job of updating the policy accordingly versus having to continuously update it where the policy handbooks are always updated.
I like the idea of sort of kicking it to, a different document that is the living document rather than the policy being the living document, so that we're not constantly revoting the policy.
Sure.
I would just say, I still think maybe since graduation requirements are reflected only in the high school, that maybe their program of studies, which is an only high school document, might be a better place for that than the student handbook, which is pre-K to post-12?
Well, technically, the student handbook is broken up into sections, so it would be the section that would be reflected for the high
Okay.
school. That would take that reference. But then you could still have the requirement that we were identifying for vocational, we would still have the requirements for MCAS, and there were other, I know that one of the things that we had talked about was having the policy itself state that starting with the class of such and such and beyond, that's what the policy would need, and that would eliminate the need for when that policy would start. But there were other policies that called out, students with special needs, other state requirements, just making sure that we're covering all our bases, especially if, any student does like a foreign language study. There were other graduation requirements that other schools called out, that if they were away for a term or whatever for the year, we should probably cover that as well. I don't know that that happens, but should the opportunity be afforded someone for that, it would be covered in the handbook.
I'm not exactly sure what the example is, maybe if you,
I apologize, I just was looking at them yesterday during the snow day.
so
It's a
I'm
prepared
just gonna
thing.
read it so that everyone can know what we're talking about. It says, this is from Mount Greylock. It says, students who are away for a term or a year to participate in the student exchange program or otherwise study abroad may receive credits toward high school graduation when 1, the study plans are approved by the school administration in advance, and 2, the institution where the study occurred submits a record of the student's work. In these instances, the principal and student's guidance counselor will evaluate the work and assign credit for it according to the standards prevailing at Mount Greylock Regional High School. I would love to hear some high school folks weigh in on that since they're here. And they actually do this.
That's also just, you have it, that's the Whittier one that I mentioned initially.
So a couple of points of clarification, that it wouldn't be the employee handbook, it would be the student handbook.
No, exactly, but I mean, out of reference, so we're still responsible to make sure that both, not specific to the, graduation requirement, which is what we're talking about, but just in general, that the school committee oversees their approval of both handbooks.
Yep.
Obviously, the teachers would, the employees wouldn't have to graduate.
So a little bit of history, so the way that we have presented the program of studies over the last 13 years that I've been at Minnetonka is we have brought it either to the curriculum sub or to the full committee with a substantive change document to say these are the changes that are proposed. And in years where we altered the graduation requirements, we brought it forth to the committee, to the full committee, and asked for a vote, 1 to accept the new graduation requirements, 1 to accept the program of studies. And anytime the program of studies was changed, the handbook, the current student handbook is reflective of those changes.
Okay.
So the graduation requirements, MCAS, certificate of attainment, all of the rules associated with getting a diploma are in the program of studies currently or in the student handbook, in the high school section.
Yep.
So the question is, students that go abroad and study somewhere, is that?
So it's not so much that if they do, it's just having a stipulation that should you have someone who was in high school level, who was afforded an opportunity to study abroad, they would have, obviously they would work with you as the principal, I'm using you as the example of the high school, but it would be to make sure that they could still get the credits required. I don't know that it happens, but if there are more than one high schools that I can see that the MASC has, policies that kind of have that outlined, I'm not saying we need to include it, I'm just highlighting it as, hey, by the way, I happen to come across this. Is it something we should consider including?
My guess is that it is similar to homeschool, meaning if I were going to Italy for 2 years and expecting to eventually return to Minnetonka and get a Minnetonka diploma, wherever you go to Italy, there would have to be some discussions and a pre-approved plan versus I'm going to go to Europe on a walkabout for a year and experience the world. So the plan would be submitted by the institution the student was getting classes, taking classes, and then that institution would have to provide a transcript but it wouldn't be dissimilar to a student who moves to Chicopee and moves back. We would have to look at that transcript and then
Yeah, no, it doesn't, and
basically-
it specifically calls out credit for foreign study. So students who are away for a term or a year to participate in a student exchange program. So where we sometimes have exchange students come to us, it would be similar if we had a student who wanted to apply to a similar program and maybe go to Italy for the school year term. But it does specifically say in these instances, the principal and student's guidance council will evaluate the work and assign credit for it according to standards prevailing to, but in this instance, because it's Mount Greylock, they identified their high school.
Yeah, I would say that the discussion has to be prior to look at the course of study,
Yep.
the institution, and whether or not they are accredited by some global accreditation program, and then finally, some sort of documentation of successful completion.
So it does say that exchange program or otherwise study abroad may receive credits towards high school graduation when, one, study plans are approved by the school administration in advance, and two, the institution where the study occurred submits a record of the student's work. So I'm only bringing it up as a mention to say, should that occur? I don't know that we've ever had an instance of that. I know that we've had exchange students, but I'm assuming you guys send something to their folks, but in the event that we had someone who would want to do the opposite and go and exchange somewhere else.
Mhm. Yeah.
As far as I could tell, we didn't have that anywhere.
No, the only thing I would suggest to add is that not only record of successful completion in the form of a transcript or that kind of thing, but also record of attendance. Because I think that data would be important too.
Okay.
I actually was a foreign exchange student many years ago, and I went through AFS, American Foreign Exchange Program, and because I went to New Zealand, maybe it was very similar to what I was experiencing in California high school. But I think you could narrow things down so much that it would be hard for the person who's applying to the exchange program to be able to complete it. I would think it would be more in terms of how many credits of English you'd get, how many credits of foreign language you get, just like an American high school. Because otherwise you're going to push these kids out of the possibility. And the possibility, unless it's changed drastically, the possibility of somebody taking advantage of absenteeism, I think is almost nil, because these programs not only send you to high school, which you have to finish, they also send you around the country you're in. And that's part of the learning process. So that's my take.
So the concern I had, and based off our audience, I would guess some of it has to do with one of the points in particular really was multifaceted. So the first part is that if you look at our graduation requirements are less intense than the recommended MASC graduation requirements. I don't think we should ever set the bar that we are less intense than the MASC. When we then look at that separately, if you look at, and I looked at Lexington, right, which again, we're not Lexington. However, I think we should always strive to look at some of those that are performing at a very high level. And if you look, they have a much different structure to their graduation requirements. So there is a difference in the number of hours, right? It's 140 hours that we have, they have 104. However, if you look at the way that theirs is stacked, it is the academic courses that you have to have the highest amount of credits for, followed by PE and wellness, which I'm guessing is some of the concern that was raised the last time. So if you look at science, 18, English, 16, math, 16, social sciences, 16, foreign language, 8, performing arts, finer performing arts, 8, PE 6, wellness 2, required to have English, math, social sciences, and sciences each of the 4 years, and one of the social sciences includes world history. And when we go to ours, there is no world history that is included there. And then as you can see, our two top ones at 20 are English and then PE, and we do not require 4 years of math, 4 years of science, 4 years of social sciences. So those would be kind of the areas that I would raise as concerns. You are the experts in it. It just seems like we should always be striving to be higher than the state recommendation.
Patrick, I just have a question. Is that school system on block scheduling and traditional?
Lexington?
Yeah.
I'm not sure, based off what I'm reading, I would assume they are traditional,
Me too.
based off the way it looks. So the other part that I really liked is they also require 40 hours of community service, which I thought was a neat addition to what they have.
And I think that came up at the last meeting, was the idea of community service. Because there are a lot of other schools, I wasn't just looking at municipal schools, I was looking at regional school districts specifically, so that it was comparing apples to apples. There are other school districts that also include that.
So those are the concerns that I saw with the graduation requirements, with the policy that we have. And I recognize that many of the things that we've raised as concerns are in the existing policy. The only thing that you had changed was the vocational portion, but I think if we're looking at it, it's an opportunity to look at all of the requirements and not just the one aspect that's changed.
It also, if I could just follow on that, was an attempt to try to bring a policy up to date with what we were actually doing, because the graduation requirements as listed in the program of studies were higher than the graduation requirements that were listed in the policy, so that was an issue as well. So I don't know if it makes sense to look at what the differences are between that MASC recommended policy and what we're currently doing, and talk to staff about why that is, what that means. Should we stretch farther around those? Would that be good use of the time of this group?
Can we also understand what developmental guidance experiences is defined as and what that would look like for a student, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the first difference that I noted between the MASC policy and our current graduation requirements.
I'm sorry, do you
We
need a
don't have the
copy?
MASC policy,
Yeah.
so this is all new.
My guess is mathematics is the
Yep.
first one that you noticed,
Yep.
where they've got minimum classes that are included.
You had a student number?
Yep.
I don't want you to feel like, Steve, I just want to make sure that you and Nick don't feel like you're being blindsided by the conversation either.
No, I don't think blindsided, it's just that we bring the program of studies every year, and there's been no question about the graduation requirements. So to have to, in a week's time, try to look at a bunch of different schools, and then you have to convert those schools. So when Lexington, I didn't write all those down, but when Lexington talks about 16 credits in math, my initial thought is that is 4 courses where they're giving 4 credits per course. The course meets all year, and it probably meets for 45 to 50 minutes. So if we convert that to what it looks like at Minichog, although there's only 3 courses in math, or 15 credits, because we give 5 credits per course. That would be 90 minutes times 90 days, and I wonder how all that math evens out. I could also pull data on, although the math is required for graduation is 3 courses, I would venture to guess 90% of our students take 6 courses in math. Because our high-end achievers would take Algebra 1 Part 2 geometry in their first year. They'd take Algebra 2 in their second year. Trig and Calc in their third year, and 4th year. And our students that come in that need a little bit of a boost take Algebra 1 Part 1, Algebra 1 Part 2, geometry, Algebra 2 sophomore year. Then they go into their trig, prob and stats, and personal finance. So the reality versus the requirements, I think is also data that we could pull in terms of the actual number of math courses that kids take.
The question that I was about to ask is not related to how many take 6, but I wondered how many take 4. If it's nearly 100%, then we probably could make that change without. I mean, my concern is if we created graduation requirement that then prevents students from graduating, who would those students be? You know. But if we're already at 4, maybe we could go to 4 without. You know, it just sort of sets the expectation for kids coming in that you should expect to take at least one math course a year, or double up 1 year so that you don't have to take them in another year.
Yeah, I think that's two different things though. If you're hoping to increase the number of math courses a student takes by adding a 4th course, that's no issue. But some students are done with that sophomore year. And we would prefer to see students that take a senior year math if they're considering community college or 4-year college.
But I think if you read that policy that I referenced, they are required to take a math, a social science, and English all 4 years. So the way that policy is written is it's made sure that a student has to do that. And I hear what you're saying loud and clear, that most students take 4, take 6, whatever it may be. But I just think we should have a more robust minimum requirement.
I think some of the things to consider here is also students, if you're saying it should happen in each year, with regard to the academic equivalencies, which will come up in the CTEC program. And there's also when students, depending on how they perform on the MCAS, if they don't reach the level of, they're proficient but not proficient enough, and they're in the educational proficiency plan or the EPP, before they can graduate, it's either they have to reach that level of math proficiency by getting a certain score on that test, or they have to take and pass a senior English, or excuse me, a senior math, which we book them in anyway if they fall in that EPP category. So.
Well, I think if you look at the MASC recommendation, I don't have it in front of me any longer, but I do believe that Algebra 2, right, each student has to have completed Algebra 2. Right, and I think that's.
Our kids are done with Algebra 2 sophomore year.
So then why wouldn't we have similar requirement standards at a minimum?
Because the MFC policy, and I'm just seeing it right now, is based on a Sapphire schedule where you only take 1 class per year. Our schedule is they're taking a semesterized course is the equivalency in length of a full year course of 45 minutes. So if you go to a 4-year math requirement where you're restricting time in that requirement, there goes a larger group of internships, there goes early graduation for kids. We're also going to need a couple more teachers, which I don't think is going to be supported in this budget year. By spreading them, because now they're going through their math courses as it is appropriate for what they want to study beyond high school, and they're knocking them off. When they get to senior year, they're either taking a senior math because they want to go to a 4-year college, or they're using that block to maybe do an internship, maybe graduate early, maybe take a college now class, all of those things. So that would be the concern there.
I don't see in this policy, maybe someone can point out to me where it says it has to be in math every year. Is that because we're saying 4 years of math?
Yeah.
Well, so I'm reading number 8, and again, this is Lexington, it's not here. Students may qualify for graduation in less than 4 full years if they have fully satisfied graduation requirements and have submitted a note from a parent to the principal authorizing early completion. So if I read that policy, they have it set up in a similar way so that if the student has the ability to graduate early, they can still graduate early. And I don't know that we're going to change it this year, and it may not make sense. It just seems like our policy is less rigorous than some other policies that are out there. If you look at it, right, here's another one. 3 years of history, social science, including US and world history. We've removed any world history, yet we have reference to the world in our mission statement, in our former mission statement, our current mission statement. So it's a bit
Right, but we replaced it.
hypocritical to not have it.
I think we put our value other places. I wouldn't say it's hypocritical. We, under the new requirement of the civics requirement for the state, created an entire course on civics. We're the leader now in the state for how to teach kids how to engage civically in their community. They do an entire project during that semesterized course. So,
But that doesn't have a, you could say that all communities are global now, but we've taken out the global requirement.
And I've asked the MASC if they're gonna update this policy to include civics, because that's, again, their policy, the reference policies, like, so, the MASC policy is a reference, to us, it's a guideline to how our policies should or could read, right? So, the idea is we wanna either match that or make it as close to what we're doing now. But I have asked them, and I'm just waiting for an answer back, and it was literally like in like the last 24 hours, how are they gonna update their policy to include civics? Because that's what the DESE has put as a requirement for us. And most of their policies are framed based off of whatever the DESE requirements are.
and many high schools are just simply embedding the civics project inside of US history too, and giving it a cursory look. We're doing the full-fledged 6-step civics project, and we're proud of that work. So although it's not listed as a requirement, what are the freshman options for students entering Minnetonka? Modern world history, or honors modern world history, or AP human geography?
So why wouldn't we have that as a minimum graduation requirement then?
Because when you list it as a requirement, you are now saying that all kids have to take that. And there are kids with special circumstances that may not be able to fit that class in. We know that at the state level, we're required to have US 1, US 2, and the civics project. So our graduation requirements that you voted for 2 years ago was 15 credits in English, and the cursory definition was US 1 and US 2. You didn't have to take modern world as a part of that 15 credits. You could take US 1, US 2, and sociology. We changed that to say it's 15 credits now, and the required courses are US 1, US 2, and civics. It doesn't change the fact that a lot of kids take modern world, a lot of kids take sociology, a lot of kids take psychology. Some of the graduation requirements that I looked at from different towns have something like 70 credits of required courses and like 52 credits of electives. I don't think that's a robust graduation requirement.
From my perspective, I think that the math discussion and the history discussion are different. With math, we're talking about, we may actually already be at this standard, and should we actually just adopt it? I think we could maybe get that with a little bit more data. So how many kids take 4? When I'm looking at the MASC policy, I also think that where they're saying years, for us, semesters would probably be the appropriate language, because we do in half a year in a block schedule what most people do in a year. And I don't think MASC would require students to take 2 out of 8 of their blocks over the course of a year for math, just to say they were enrolled all year in math. I don't think that's what the intent was. I think it really means 4 math courses. I think the other question on the history is different. It's, do you want world to be a requirement? In which case, you'd have to take away well, I guess you wouldn't have to take away anything, but you would have to add to a history a 4th course as a requirement.
But wouldn't that be the civics then?
No, because civics is one of the 3 that's already required.
Okay. I didn't know what you meant by the end.
We would also increase staffing needs, because if you have 225 freshmen coming in, and based on their unique needs, let's say 185 of them take Modern World. If now we're saying they're required to take it, that there's another 45 kids, so that's 2 sections, so that's 1/3 of a teacher that I need to increase the budget by.
Or remove the word world from our mission statement. So we'll just read in responsible citizens within a safe, healthful environment.
I don't know that that'll go over as well, because that was done through the strategic planning of the community and our educators, like that was an overall, like that was an ask from
But our
the
graduation
lobby.
requirements do not match the mission statement. And it may be that most students are taking it, I'm not saying they're not, but if we're gonna put things in writing, we should live it.
Oh, no, and again, that's why I went, after reviewing so many of these policies, I came back with the one from Whittier to say that maybe our policy is we let the administration have that in, you know, your program of studies and the handbook, and it's identified. But then, you know, if it turns out that we really need to look at the rigor, I mean, that's what's supposed to come out of the strategic plan. You know, Steve, when we were going through all those meetings for the strategic planning stuff, that was like the number one thing that everybody agreed on was vocational options and rigor. And so I realize that this puts more on you, as the principal, to try to see how we can figure this out. And maybe make sense to just model it to see what that would look like. If we were to try to take what we have now to match that, I will also find out from the MASC if they base their graduation requirements on a Sapphire schedule or a block schedule. And if they even took that into consideration when they were creating these requirements.
The model also does not have any requirements around applied arts, which is in contradiction to the data out of the process of the strategic plan, that we needed to create more pathways for vocational.
So that's where I think the C-Tech was, we were adding that. Because it's not gonna happen overnight, but we were starting that process.
Right, but we currently require an applied art.
Okay.
So,
Of everyone.
beyond C-Tech students. So, and then the 2 years of required foreign language, I just think we're not, so the graduation requirements are the minimum requirements to get a diploma. Not necessarily, we have a lot of students that any current change to our graduation requirements to this program is going to, our graduation percentage will be low 70s.
Why would you grandfather them in, and then you, if you were to make a change, it would start with students moving in. It would be unfair to change requirements on someone that have been in a system under the existing rules. So if you look at the C-Tech language, the last sentence, the Minichog principal shall have sole discretion to award such credits based on student performance at C-Tech. You potentially could add something like that in there that would cover some of the situations that you're referencing. I just think we should always be raising the bar. And I'm not sure that if most of our students are meeting the minimum, let's gradually raise the minimum. Our sole mission from a school committee, which it should be, is student achievement and improving student achievement by having graduation standards that may or may not be as robust as they could be. Is that really driving and improving student achievement? I don't know that it is.
Well, what's the correlation between graduations and student achievement in a data form for these other school districts? I mean, we'll gladly take the funding that Lexington gets.
Listen, I'm with you on that one.
No, I'm with you, but to me, we're not gonna, you're not gonna, it's free agent time and new coaches in the NFL. You're not gonna base your system off what the Washington football team runs, right? You're gonna look at it and say, all right, what have the 49ers done? And that's why you see most of their coaches go elsewhere and their systems. And so I think when we look at it, we should look at Lexington and understand what are the top of the top doing, and are there things we can learn from that to improve what we're offering our students.
But I feel like to Steve's point though, while we should be looking at Lexington, I think for us, it makes more sense to be looking at one of the more higher performing regional school districts, because that more aligns with how we get funding, how it falls under all the requirements that we have to cover that municipal schools don't. So, you know, from a financial perspective, there's a lot of things that Lexington pays through their municipality that we have to pay as a regional school.
I did ask Steve to take a look at graduation requirements in some of our DART schools, particularly the ones at the top of that comparison group. I don't know what the result of that was. What would you say like our top performing comparable schools?
So Mansfield, 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of social studies, no foreign language.
Is that a municipal or regional school?
Regional. Excuse me.
Mansfield is
Municipal.
municipal.
The only regional ones, most of our darts are municipal, they're not regional.
I don't know how
And
you can compare them, they're not the
I
same.
thought there were two in the darts that were regional.
Dayton Rehoboth that we looked at the other day is regional, and then, what was the other one that we looked at?
I think there were
Blackstone
two.
Valley. Well,
Raspberry.
you have to,
Hanson, I believe.
Whitman Hanson was the other one,
Yeah.
yes.
you have to clarify though that the school districts in the district start are different than the school districts in Minichog start.
That's
So
true.
we're assigned to a different DART group. Many of them are the same.
I was trying to
They're
figure it
not-
out on the website
Yeah.
of where you get the data,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
So no fine art, no applied art from Mansfield, and four credits of phys ed. And their credits are 2 half-year health classes and 2 half-year phys ed classes. Situate is 16 credits of English, which for them, a semester course is 2 credits. So basically that's 4 years of English. They have 4 years of math, 3 years of science, 3 years of history, no foreign language, no fine art, no applied art, and 8 credits of phys ed wellness, 4 credits of health, 4 credits of phys ed, which is basically for 1 semester of health. I'm sorry, 2 semesters of health and 2 semesters of phys ed. Looked at some local school districts, Long Meadow, 4 years of English, 2 years of math. We're talking about 2 years of science.
Is that block schedule?
No, they have a
That's right.
weird, it's like a
It's like a
3-week rotating schedule where
Yeah.
Fridays are different. It's a,
So it's apples and oranges.
yeah. Basically 3 years of 3 years of history, sorry, not US history. And they have 4 credits of phys ed wellness, 2 credits of health, and 2 credits of wellness.
So there's one school in that group that has the 4-year requirement for math.
Correct.
Do any of them require a world history as part of the social studies sequence?
Long Meadow has 5 credits of world history.
And
Situate has 2 semesters or a course in world history.
I think when we're looking at trying to parcel all this out, we also used to look at where our graduates were going in terms of our higher level graduates in the AP courses. What college were they ending up in? We kind of let that pass as colleges got more and more expensive, so then it became not so much what you could get, but what you could afford. But we should be looking to see what colleges are upper level kids who are taking the 4 as opposed to the 3-year courses, where they're going. I think that would give us another piece of information.
I mean, but you could take the higher end level schools, you can take the local schools like Winnick and, you know, Westfield States and the local colleges and get kind of the same information, because there are minimum requirements that they have to meet in order even to be able to get into the school.
Yeah, I
They're
think
required on the transcripts, so.
The challenging part about colleges and universities now, you have to look at the program, because many of the colleges and universities have started honors colleges. Like, for example, UMass Amherst has an honors college where the dorms are air conditioned, that kind of thing. And just
Instead
as
of
a,
those regular levels that make you sweat it out.
yeah, so just as a comparison quickly, BU has a 9%, because I did some recent research on this. BU has a 9% acceptance rate. So they had about 63,000 applicants last year, accepted 9% of them. UMass Amherst has a 60% acceptance rate. However, the average GPA to get into UMass right now is a 3.99, and the average GPA to get into BU is a 3.6. And that's basically the economy of college these days, that rather than spend $70,000 a year at a BU, I can spend 40 and go to UMass, and maybe be able to pay my college debt getting out of college. So it's forcing more kids to look at state universities and colleges.
On the world history question, I wonder if you could say a little bit more about the special needs students have. I was interpreting that as saying maybe some kids don't take world history because they have IEPs that require them to go to content support or something like that. Is that something that happens?
It's not many students on an IEP. They would have to be students with an IEP with a heavy secret service. So beyond just a support class, they have multiple pull-out supports that cause them not to take a world history their freshman year. It also allows them to manage their content load, where they're taking maybe 2 core courses first semester and 2 core courses second semester, with their support, with an elective. So it's not every student that takes an IEP, but it's some with a more intense service grade.
Are there students besides the ones that you just described that would not end up taking world history?
No. If they're, right now, the Wilbraham Middle School and Green Meadows are filling out their courses, and that's one of the things that we put right on there. You need one of these, you need one of those, you need, and world history, human geography are the option for social studies.
So I wonder if a possible position we could take on this would be to make it a requirement, but also recognize through the IEP process you can modify your graduation requirements. There are 3 things. You have, it's been a while since I did this, but you have, you can modify the content, or you can modify the assessment for students through an IEP. So you could say that we're modifying their high school content by removing the world history requirement so that the student can take all the special ed courses they need.
So,
And then that way you wouldn't be putting a barrier to graduation for them.
the Monument Mountain Regional has a call out on there. They do the credits by courses. They do like the English, Social Studies, Science. They have all the credits, and they talk about like the electives they'd be earned. But they have a specific call out for special needs where they say students identified as having special needs as defined by Chapter 766 and Public Law 94-142 will have a specific educational plan written which specifies his or her individual requirements for graduation at Monument Mountain Regional High School. The annual education plan shall be updated by a core review, which I'm assuming is either their program, like their IEP review, or maybe you guys know what that means. Review each year to assess progress towards completion of graduation requirements. Upon satisfactory completion of graduation requirements, as per the cumulative education plan, the diploma or a certificate of completion shall be awarded. And then they identify, looking at the process below, because they do a -E to their policy, which I didn't bring, but I can get that.
That's what I was saying.
So there's a bunch of different things I think that need to be included in our policy. It's just, what do we want to put in our policy? And I look to my fellow school committee members and say, do we want to identify all of the courses? Or do we want to kind of take some direction from the policy, I think it's Whittier, where they just, they leave it up to the districts to kind of keep that in the school, the student handbook and the program of studies. But I would say that to the concern of the rigor, it's been identified through the strategic plan that that's something that we have to identify. So I think as we go through that process, I can only hope that if anything, we look to say, we'll make it more rigorous, but we're not gonna be there overnight. So I look to you guys for feedback.
So I'm gonna go to Steve's comment, and he said, I don't think there's much of an appetite in this budget to add teachers. So if you have a less rigorous standard, that makes it easier to make decisions based off of budgetary constraints. If you have a more robust standard, it makes it really difficult. So if you have as a graduation requirement 2 courses or years, whatever you want to look at it, of foreign language, you can't cut those positions without modifying your graduation requirements and your policy. So to me, the more rigorous we make something, the greater we protect education. And so I don't think we should be dictating what courses are included. I do think it's interesting that we have nothing, if world is in our mission, that we don't require foreign language and we don't require world history, when if you look at many, so I just looked at Lincoln Sudbury, for example. So, okay, let's go to a district, a regional high school at a minimum. They don't require world history, but they require foreign language. So if you look at it, there are ways to do that. The other part that they do, to Steve's earlier part, is they say for students graduating in 2026, for students graduating in 2025, so they've added some computer science requirements. That's a way to do it. Or you can provide the discretion back to the principal as we discussed. So I don't think we should be dictating as a school committee what courses are in there. It would just be the broader, do we think this is robust enough for what we're looking for?
So part of me thinks that, or hopes that as we go through the implementation of the strategic plan, that would shake itself out. Because that's part of why, that horizontal and vertical education and making sure all students are coming into the high school prepared. That it may start that some of the math starts a little sooner in 6th, 7th, 8th grade again, I don't know, but it may change as we look to see how we really are performing as a district, but as a whole and not just at the high school level for graduation. It should start sooner than high school, because if you're getting to the high school and you're not at some of those levels in the math that you're required to be, we have a bigger problem.
Well, what was one of the first questions that was asked? Actually, I think Aaron was interrupted, not interrupted, but someone stopped him and said, can I ask a question on, can we take that out of the budget? What was that? Do you remember? It was the strategic plan implementation dollars that were in there.
Yep.
So if you want to preserve and really ensure that the strategic plan does and
Oh, yeah,
focuses
but
on
that's
the
why it's
robust,
still, this
create the
still in
policies that
Yeah.
protect, or else we're hypocritical of what we've got here. So that would be my piece. I do have questions on PE though, if we can ask that. So looking at Lincoln Sudbury, and this goes to John, the comment that you made the last time, great example, under their wellness department alternate activity policy. Alternate activity will be available to second semester 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders. A maximum of 2 alternate activity credits may be earned in 1 year. Students must maintain a full course load of 7 courses. Recognize that's a bit different here. Participation in a LS athletic team or out-of-school activity must be pre-approved by the wellness department coordinator. Her contact information, here's the application. Participation on an athletic team or an instructional out-of-school experience must occur during the semester in which the student would normally be enrolled in a wellness class. There will be no retroactive credit given, nor can a student bank credit for future use. A request for alternate wellness experience is not a guarantee that it will be granted. Is that part of the for physical education, health development, and then we have this guidance experiences? Or no, is that not something that we offer at Minnetonka Regional High School?
We don't have a policy for credit for athletic participation.
No, and I think that's what the ask was would we consider that? correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it came up as someone had asked that question of if we would consider it.
I think it was part of the question, right, when we looked at it, I thought, John, you had mentioned that things like gym memberships in some cases can count and meet the state requirements, so then the question became, do we do that here? And then the second part, if we don't, is there a reason why, or is there an opportunity to do that, which then frees up, to your point, most
Another
of our
class.
students take 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 maths, well, now maybe a student's taking 9, 10 maths, or whatever it may be, because they're receiving that wellness activity elsewhere, and not something that's built into their schedule during the day.
I feel like that'd be way more for you guys to have to manage and sign off and approve, but I mean, you know who your athletes are. It may open room for another, I'm not saying applied art, but
Well, the management side of it is challenging. So when you schedule phys ed classes, there are typically 35 to 40 kids in a class. So if you cut that and say the varsity soccer team, you don't have to take a phys ed, where do those 40 kids go? They have to go into 2 different sections. So for every one phys ed section you cut, it creates 2 sections elsewhere.
okay.
So the budgetary impact is actually greater. The other thing is, I think that the health side of the curriculum, those students don't get on the varsity soccer team. The developmental guidance curriculum, they don't get. The developmental guidance curriculum is our guidance counselors go in to the phys ed classes and teach a unit to them. And many of those units are, here's how to run Naviance, here's how to use Naviance to look for a possible college or career interest. Here's what you should be working on your sophomore year to get ready. Here's what a college visit looks like. That's where we do our whole sophomore job readiness program, where we get members from the community to come in and give mock interviews to sophomores who are getting ready to apply to their first job, part-time job. How do you do a resume? Where do you look for part-time jobs? All of that stuff is through the developmental guidance program.
So I think that's why if you look at it, and I'm just using one, you can only do it as a second semester because they include that wellness, et cetera, in that first semester, so that's why they block it off. And then for 12th grade, the wellness requirement is participation in escalation workshop and senior service workshop. So they've got some of it factored in there. So there are ways you could get creative. I don't know if that allows students to take more courses if we were to offer something along those lines.
I don't want you to think that we're in here telling you that what you guys are doing is wrong, because that's not what's happening. We're just we're just looking at what other options are out there, what other schools are doing, to make sure that not only are we following our policy, because our requirement as a school committee is we've established a policy and we're not following it. So we have to figure out how we get there, and if we are. So if we're identifying that the program of studies doesn't meet our policy, something has to change. But it's harder for us to change our policy if it's supposed to have rigor and we're not doing that. But it's
Yeah, I
how
don't
do
think
we
it's
find
as
a happy
simple as
balance?
that. I think there's a lot of rigor at Minnetonka and what the kids are taking. In terms of graduation requirements, they may not be there in requirement, but in reality of what the kids are taking. And I also think that it's about the timing, I think, for me more than anything. Like, we already did our program of studies. I'm already scheduling freshmen next week. The sophomores, juniors, and current freshmen will be doing it the week after that. And I've got to cut, $300,000 or whatever the number is out of the budget.
I don't think
But
this is about this
it's
year.
like,
Oh, yeah, no,
Yeah, I
we're
don't
just,
think this is about this
is
year, this is about future years. I think we
Yeah.
need to send this as it is probably to the committee, because
with
we're
the ad of the
too
seat
far
side,
along.
yeah.
yeah.
But, as you look at future years, is there an opportunity to raise the bar, if you will, on what the graduation requirements are, to look at some things differently that may allow for greater academic achievement or student achievement?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is when we raise the bar, I worry about the kids who are just meeting the bar. And those kids aren't necessarily, they're struggling with social and emotional health, they're struggling with their family situations, they're struggling with disabilities, they're struggling with many things that we get them to that bar. And those students will be much harder to get to that bar. And a lot of those students will be those high needs, subgroup students that I don't think it's good for them.
Steve, raising the,
Sure, can you just speak up a little?
raising the bar, is it possible, would you think of going back to regular schedule instead of a block? Would that help those students identify?
I would be happy to move back to the regular schedule. It's gonna cost a lot of money. Your current teachers in a 4x4 teach 6 classes. In a traditional 7-period schedule, they only teach 5. So that means for every one staff member, you're adding a section to your budget.
But aren't you also putting in department heads that only teach 3 sections because they're department heads?
The department heads teach 5 out of 6, so they only have one block extra off. So they would be necessarily a wash, but that would have to be renegotiated with the teachers union, because that's kind of the benefit package of being a department chair. But the impact to the other 80 teachers, you're going from 6 classes down to 5. So there's going to be a large staff increase as a result.
Different things I think would be interesting to look at, or understand.
Yep.
Because I don't know that we as a full school committee understand the difference between what that regular schedule looks like, the block schedule, and how that impacts the rigor of not just the graduation requirements, but the student learning. Because at the end of the day, we're all here for the same reason, right? To get these kids educated and make them really good contributing members of society, so.
Yeah, I think I can speak to that one a little bit, because I have done some research around this, because I knew it was a question in the community. And you'll find that the empirical data shows that block scheduling is either a little bit better or a little bit worse than the traditional scheduling. But 90% of high schools in the country are on the block. The reason why is because, what Steve said, it's more cost effective.
But that's a problem, right, John? So at least 4 times Steve brought up budget, 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 budget. The mission isn't to improve student achievement, asterisks, in the most budgetary way possible. It's to improve student achievement. And so if our principals are that concerned, and I understand why they are, that concerned about, well, I'd love to do that, but budget, I'd love to do that, but budget. I mean, that's really problematic.
I agree with that point entirely. I guess the one thing I would just say is, it would be super problematic for me if we had data that showed a traditional schedule was definitely better, but everyone's doing the block.
I'm not talking block and everything, it's the other points
Yes.
where budget came up, budget came up, budget came up. And that's how how many of the decisions, I shouldn't say many, how at least some of the decisions on what we require and what we offer are being made. And when we look at our students compared to others, just looking at some of the other offerings that folks have, both in our DART and not, when it comes to foreign languages, we'll be adding, what, conversational Italian next year, I think, potentially? And not many of them have that, but many of them have Mandarin, they have German, they have substantially more from a foreign language standpoint. And that's tough if we're competing, as Steve's talking about, a 7% or 9% acceptance rate to BU, a 60% to UMass, but with a higher GPA. So we're competing, our students are competing against each and every one of those kids. And if we're not giving them an equal leg to stand on, we're doing them a disservice, and we're just doing everybody a disservice for student achievement.
Or even an advantage to stand out.
Agreed. I think the reason why a lot of administrators' heads are in that space is because of the historical data that Aaron was showing last last week or 2 weeks ago, I mean, not just 1 year of very thin budgets, but year after year after year of very thin budgets. I think based on the way that we're funding education in the state, you know, there are some districts that are benefiting from additional funds, but they're usually benefiting from a lot of other challenges. I'll go to the MAS testimony that was given on the governor's budget. If that SOA funds that we all advocated for, I said I was down in Boston myself doing it, has now gone to about a quarter of the districts in the state, leaving everyone else out in the cold. We are one of hundreds of students hundreds of districts that are looking at a $25 per student increase this year, which is on top of a $25 increase many years because of the way the model works. I haven't done this when I was here, since I've been here, but I can tell you that when I was in Northampton, I looked at the actual dollars provided by the state, not inflation adjusted dollars, whatever, but they were providing more to that community 20 years ago than they were last year. And that's not unique to that district or this district, it's a lot of us. That's why many of us, our whole time as administrators, have been trying to figure out how to make budgets work.
But our dark schools have the same, in theory, or many of the same limitations, and if we look, the offerings that they're able to provide, in some cases, are that much greater in certain areas. And some, as Steve said, our civics program is one to model.
Yep.
It just would be nice to have it, so that they're not focused on budget with every decision that they make, but instead what's best for student achievement. Motion to send policy number IKF to the full committee.
We wouldn't necessarily make a motion, we'd just make it all in favor.
Okay.
Yeah. With the changes that are on the track, you mean?
Yes.
Now, we had talked about the potential of adding that other section for special needs. Do you want to, we can add that at a later date?
I really like that language, but if this is going to come back later, I think maybe doing it at a later date, because as we've all said, this is pretty far down the road.
Yep.
We're just trying to catch up to the collaborative stuff that's happening.
Yep, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So, can I just ask, what did we just vote on?
We didn't vote on anything. We're just gonna take the
Just
policy as
taking
it's
that policy,
drafted.
that draft, Steve, up to,
So what's, I don't have
did I give you the
that.
packet?
Can you just zoom in on it a little bit? So we can see it?
That's the old one.
It's this
There you go.
It's pretty much the same thing that we have in our policy now, only we added the vocational and the
CTEC
CAS
portion at the
requirements.
Okay.
You can disregard anything I wrote, those are just notes.
We're not making you do anything else yet. Maybe in a
Gotcha.
couple years they will. So the next thing we'll probably do is look at that student handbook, just to make sure that they align.
How's
I
the
think
big
that's what-
meeting next year, because I feel bad that we've gone to the curriculum subcommittee and approved it, and then now we're in the policy subcommittee, and they're back again. Maybe we should remember to combine curriculum and policy to look at
Sure.
this next year. So you don't have to do this again, I'm sorry.
Well, no worries. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for coming.
Thanks.
Oh, and just like that, I lost our audience. Okay, so I think the last one we had was the JH student absences.
Before we go on, I just want to revise what I just said.
You need to
Because I
speak up
don't-
though.
What?
You just need to speak up a little.
I just want to revise what I just said because I don't want to violate open meeting law. I think we should have something akin to the financial roundtable, but have a curriculum roundtable with the full committee and look at these issues so these people are not put in this hot seat.
Well,
Yeah.
ideally, the policy that we have, whatever you guys are voting on, is already meeting what the policy is. That's why I only brought the Whittier one
No,
as
no,
an
yeah.
example, but
I'm just saying, let's think creatively for next year. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
Listen, it's been, the requirements have been a policy since they were adopted, so. Okay, moving on to JH, student absences and excuses.
The modifications we discussed at the last meeting on this, we're doing parent guardian throughout the document and removing principal, or discussing how we address principal and person with equivalent title to take out the sexism in the language.
Okay.
So I think that's been done throughout. If you want to just double check it, I think that was really the only suggestions that we made last time.
And then we've got that under 6 piece that we had talked about last time.
Yep, it's
Yep.
on back.
It's still there.
So those are the only changes, right? The under 6 that we added, and then the grammar piece.
Correct.
And then we're leaving the legal references there, or no? Because they're not included on the draft.
I'm sorry, they should be included.
So is it possible for you to take what our current policy is and just put in red the changes, so that if you're striking something,
Mhm.
it'd just be a line out of it, and then it would just be in bold what the ad is, just
Sure.
so that there's only, then you only have to bring one document to the full committee to review,
Yeah.
versus having multiple. I think it becomes a little confusing when you're trying to make sure you're looking at one document versus another.
Mhm.
So you could still do the, like, ads would be yellow, but anything that's changed would be struck out with red.
Okay.
And I'm happy to help with that if that's helpful for you guys.
Yeah, that'd
Because
be
I realize
great.
it's asked for us, but I just need the documents in Word form. I can do that.
That'd be great.
Okay, so anybody else want any changes other than just making for the,
Everybody runs on it.
yep,
No, I'm good.
all those in favor to send that to the full committee?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so, for future, meeting, I don't know if you guys get the MASC policy update. I did send it to Erin. Did you include that in the folder for them to look at?
I don't, I didn't, I will put it in.
Okay.
Not for the full committee? Just for this
No,
committee?
that was for the, just so that they would know that we would have a list of policies that need to be reviewed. I brought it with me. So, the MASC sent out their policy newsletter. It's dated from March of 2023. Kinda looks like this. I don't know if you get MASC mail at home. I get mine at home. But on their website, they have its policies that they added to their reference manual, policies that they're removing from their manual, and then a list of policies that should be reviewed. So before I started the undertaking of actually looking at all these policies to see what we have, I wanted to make sure you guys had the opportunity to see it, because we're probably gonna need to schedule a few meetings that may take a little bit longer than just an hour. But I also wanted to make sure John had an opportunity to review the newsletter, kind of see what it was, ask any questions.
I've scanned it, I wouldn't say I've thoroughly reviewed it.
I didn't know if there were any policies under the policies that should be reviewed that you thought we should prioritize over others.
I don't know if the field trip policy is on there. Aaron Osborne pointed out to me that our current version of the field trip policy doesn't require school committee approval for out-of-state travel, which we have been doing just because I felt that that's part of everyone's policy. and
We've always
Should be,
approved.
yeah.
So that.
All field trips have.
We've
Yeah.
approved, and we've always said it's a school committee requirement to approve
Yeah.
overnight or out of state.
So if
Okay.
that's not on the list, I would add that to the list.
Yep, nope.
I thought, out of state, unless it was in a butter state, like if a sports team was going to meet in New York, right over the line.
But I think that was in
Sports
the
team, we
daytime.
haven't approved field trips, so we've always approved whatever grade it is that goes to Connecticut Science Center. I wanna say it's maybe 4th or 5th grade that goes, we've always approved that because
Okay.
they're going to,
I was thinking sports.
Cross the state line for a field trip. And then the ones that, whatever that trip to DC is that we see,
Yeah.
and
8th grade.
then the EF.
Mhm.
can we have a policy that MASC can save on money and not send everything to our house?
That doesn't work like
I'd
that.
love to know what their mailing budget is, so if we could
Well,
create
you,
a
by all means, you
policy
can feel free to reach
as
out.
an MASC member and
and-
let them know that this is a waste of our resources, I'd be really excited to write that policy.
Okay, well, I'll keep that in mind.
And it's normally like this big, it's not a standard envelope, it's,
This one came folded small. It came folded in a regular envelope. But it's also on their website underneath.
I'll add it to the drive right now.
Their website is like really new and it actually
It
is,
is.
it's so much more functional than what they used to have. So when it's one of the very first things on their homepage. So I would encourage and empower you to do some homework and take a look at the policies and then potentially let me know if there's any policies you think we should look at. I've been going through a lot of them because I clearly don't have more fun things to do with my life right now, but I wanna make sure that I leave this in good standing before I leave at the end of this, school committee, before the end of the school committee term.
Am I missing something? Probably. I just go to the website and look at the MASCs, as opposed to HWRSDs and HWRSD's changes. That's how I've been looking.
You can do that.
Okay.
But so what they did is they, there's links on the one that's on their website that actually give you the document. So I had sent the link document to Erin so that you could see and actually, I was looking at them compared to what the HWRSD has and what theirs was proposing.
Okay, thank you.
And so at some point, like depending on what the policy is, then I can pull it down and I can show what the modifications are.
I'm
There
gonna
are-
share it with you now, Cheryl, in the drive, so you'll have it. Do you want me to print one as, while you're
No,
here?
in the drive's fine, thank you.
Because some of the stuff that's just smaller language and grammatics, we could probably just quickly look at that and just share it, and we can get some of these through, but, there were other schools, when I was looking at policies for other things, that they identify in the bottom of their policy when it's reviewed at the subcommittee level and it's reviewed at the committee level. And I think we need to get into the habit of that, because some of our policies don't have, you don't know when it got voted in, and, or if it's just when we accepted the policy book manual back in 2016, 2018.
That's
And
a
so-
good point, Maura, putting on there.
I think it's something that it will probably put more in you, Erin.
Well, but it really,
But-
when I'm looking for,
There was
Yeah.
like, so there was, I was looking at subcommittee ones and Bridgewater Rainham put on there, approved by the school committee by date, reviewed by the policy subcommittee by a date, and approved by the school committee at a date. I just think for purposes of making sure we're doing our diligence, you'll be able to tell what
yeah, I was
policies
gonna say it'll help. me
versus the
along
colored sheets that Kate used to put in the binder. But then going forward, everything would have a,
a date,
yes.
like I said.
So with that in mind, I think we should take a look at what those policies are, if there's anything that we want to identify as changing. Some of the grammatical ones, I don't think, some of them are more for municipals and don't really apply to us. Maybe just to knock some of them off. But we were also asked to take a look at stabilization funds, as well as the, which is, we don't have a policy for, as well as our existing subcommittees of the school committee policy, BDE. So for the next meeting, I'd like to talk about the stabilization one first, because I did find 2 schools that actually have stabilization funds that I think we should look at.
and you took copious notes, right?
So, yes. I just don't remember what school this one was. Oh, Raynham, yeah. They actually have one that's expenditures of funds set aside in the stabilization fund. So I think we should look at creating a stabilization policy.
Oh, was it Rayner? Did you say Rayner?
Rainham, I thought.
VR, it sounded like,
Yeah, Raynham.
yeah.
Oh, Rayner.
Bridgewater Raynham.
Bridgewater Ring.
Anything else we would want, any other policies you think that should be discussed?
No.
Because I really don't, I want to make sure we're using good use of your time, but we as a subcommittee kind of have to tick through some of these other policies just to make sure that we're
Yeah.
not only complying with them, but we owe it to our district to make sure that our policies are up to date. And if we're not using any, let's take them out.
Mhm.
Makes sense to me. So, the next meeting date, do we want to try for April?
Fine with me.
What's your calendar look like, Patrick?
Ugly?
Good.
When are you thinking?
Is there a certain date that works? I didn't realize that you guys had today as a PD day.
That's fine, I mean, PD day is actually a good day for me to do this.
Okay, do you have any PD days in April? I don't remember the calendar, but
I'm checking.
April break is 17th.
Is Good Friday a PD day or no?
I think it's
There's
just,
nothing.
no, I think they have that off.
yeah.
It is
it's a
off.
Closed day.
People like me still have to work on that day. We don't get that as an off.
Not a lot of people get it off.
I don't think we have a PD day in April, so,
Is there one calendar day that potentially we could allow for maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours of your time? It may not take that much time, but I just want to allot for,
Do you want to keep it on
I'm gonna-
Wednesday?
yeah, I'm gonna ask Lauren to weigh in on that, she knows better than me.
20, I was looking at the
That's okay.
26th of April.
I can't do that. I can't do Wednesdays in April.
how about how do Tuesdays look for him?
Good, as long as they're not, like Tuesday the 11th is planning committee, so it would be either
Yeah, we wouldn't do that day.
Tuesday the April 4th. Tuesday,
That
April
might be a
4th.
quick turnaround based on the thickness of that packet.
Well, I'll be able to go through it and try to identify some of the changes. How's your calendar look?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are all atrocious.
Okay, so it either has to be a Monday or a Friday? Well, we vote on the budget by next week,
Well, on
so.
Good Friday, nobody will be around.
Wouldn't be a very good Friday if they had to show up here though.
I know. How about the 10th? I mean, it's Easter Monday, but,
Well, technically, I've got a FinOps meeting then, I'm hoping
Well,
that
we-
gets
I'm hoping that'll get canceled after next week.
Right. Or after tomorrow, well, I guess you said we were gonna meet again,
Potentially, well, we have to vote by next Thursday, I think.
right, but you could vote tomorrow.
We could, but I don't know.
I think he's
So-
hoping for that.
I know. Well, let's plan on maybe the 10th, and there won't be a finance and operations meeting. We can always ask them to reschedule that. Because I don't have it on my calendar, so if it's not on mine, it's not happening.
Okay, so we'll do it,
Can you do April 10th? Are you good with April 10th?
Perfect,
4 o'clock?
absolutely.
Does that work? Okay.
I love 4 o'clock.
I try to keep it as close to the end of the day. I will rush to get here, but I will be here. So the next meeting will be April 10th at 4 PM here at the district office. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Decisively moved.
I said, so moved.
Second.
Usually he's the person to jump on that. All those in favor?
Put it on my
Aye.
calendar. Aye.
The meeting is adjourned at 5:18 PM.
Thank you.
John, I have an unrelated question for you.
Sure.
I noticed in the